Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Allison Hurrier, and I head up the Textile Arts curriculum at Portland State University. For those of you who are joining us from outside of the university today, the Textile Arts curriculum is an elective track in the BFA Art Practice program that provides an interdisciplinary approach to clothing and the study of textiles. We offer courses in weaving, surface design, sewn construction, and dress history that encourage students to develop portfolios for a variety of applications in apparel, costume, textiles, and contemporary art. This is one of several free public events that we are hosting this term, where we bring in outside perspectives to supplement our current course offerings. Please visit our website or subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date about our upcoming programming. I'll pop that in the chat right now. We will be announcing our spring term calendar very soon. Today, I am so thrilled to be hosting Dyese Matthews with as a guest with Annan Barrett, who's teaching our History of Dress 2 course. But before I begin and turn things over to Annan and Dyese, I just wanted to acknowledge that we are joining you from Portland State University, which is located in the heart of downtown Portland, Oregon, and Multnomah County. We honor the Indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on, the Multnomah, Kathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of Chinook, and the Tualatin Kayapuyya, and many other Indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. Dyese, we are so thrilled to have you with us today. I'm going to turn things over to Annan Barrett, who will introduce Dyese.
Yeah, thank you, Dyese, for joining us today. I want to tell you just a little bit about her background. Dyese is currently a PhD student in the Apparel Design program at Cornell University. She earned her BA in Fashion Merchandising and Design from Central Michigan University and her Master of Sciences in Apparel Merchandising and Design from Iowa State. In her research, she explores experiences of dress embodiment, identity expression, and self-definition with a focus on Black identity and fashion. Today, she's going to discuss her master's thesis research project and exhibit, which explores Black fashion on the college campus. And I couldn't be more happy. Thank you very much, Dyese.
Thank you, Allison and Annan, for having me. Give me one moment and I'll share my screen. All right, so I'm very excited to be here. It's kind of late afternoon for me, maybe different time zones for different folks who are joining today from different areas. But as they shared, I am Dyese Matthews, and I'm currently a PhD student in apparel design at Cornell. And I'll be talking today about fashion and activism, Black women students' style in the museum. And this is all about my research that I actually did as a master's student at Iowa State University. So when we think about fashion and style and activism and Black identity, we can think of referencing Dr. Tanisha C. Ford when she describes soul style. And soul style is a fashionable expression of Blackness to visibly identify with the civil rights era and to be seen as Black enough. And Dr. Ford also introduces this concept of the soul sister, and basically what the soul sister can be understood as is a Black woman during this era who would embody soul style and really use her garments to express that Blackness and activist identity. We can also think about fashion activism, which Blake defines as the labor that marginalized communities undertake to leverage fashion, style, or dress to affirm their identities, build community, and resist oppressive structures in society. So these are two concepts that I really kept in mind and centered during my research, and we will revisit them throughout today's talk. So when we look at a brief history of specifically fashion or dress being used as an expression of Black identity or activism. One example is the Black Panther Party. And I'll also share that throughout the talk, I'll probably be using the terms dress, fashion, appearance pretty interchangeably. But what I'm talking about when using those words is basically any way that you modify your body. So it could be, your clothing, it could be your hairstyle, it could be your jewelry or accessories, it could be the tattoos on your body. And the work that I do, I try to look at those modifications of the body and try to interpret them and understand how they become expressions of people's identities. So with that, this image that we see here is of a number of Black Panther Party members, including Kathleen Cleaver, who's in the middle. But the Black Panthers became known for their appearance. They had a very particular style, and that was all Black ensembles, leather jackets, Black berets. Many of the members had afros. And they would wear pins with the Black Power fist on them. And they had a very specific aesthetic to themselves. And this is one example that shows us how dress can be used to directly express both Black identity as well as activist identity. Moving forward a bit, we look at the 1990s or the late 80s, 90s, and kind of the early 2000s. We can think about hip hop culture, right? And how clothing during that time became really, really dominant, specifically when we think about Black owned brands that became to be known as urban wear brands. So we can think about FUBU, Karl Kani, Sean John, all of these brands owned by Black people that were reflective of Black culture. And the image that we see here is of LL Cool J. This image was from 1988. And this image really embodies that type of aesthetic. So during that time, it was really popular for folks to wear gold rope chains that you can see in this image, as well as different jewelry and the Kangol hat, which became really, really popular amongst the hip hop community. And we'll be revisiting the Kangol hat later on. But again, this is a great way or a great example of Black identity being expressed through fashion. And the image that's playing, the video that's playing here on a loop is a pretty well-known Gap commercial. I don't know when this was shot. It may have been the 2000s at this point, or maybe the 90s. But this is LL Cool J again. And what happened was Gap hired him to do a commercial, and they thought it would be really cool if he could rap a song, rap a rap. And the point for Gap was to promote their jeans. But what Gap didn't know was in this video, LL Cool J has on a FUBU hat, which he did on purpose. And he, in his rap, says the phrase "for us, by us," which is what FUBU stands for. So what LL Cool J does in this example, he's using or he's expressing his Black identity, right, by actively wearing this brand. And then he's taking it even further to take an activist perspective and creating space and demanding space for this brand on the platform that wasn't necessarily built for it. There is a lot to say about the struggles that these brands faced when they were coming up. Many of the entrepreneurs who started these brands were denied loans from banks on multiple occasions, specifically with FUBU. They were denied retail floor space in the big box stores, all of these things. So it's really, really impressive and quite revolutionary. I would say that LL Cool J took this opportunity to, help FUBU become a more well-known brand. And then we can continue to move along the timeline here. And this is from 2014, this image. And it was taken at the Justice for All rally in DC. And we can see in this image that this person is actively showing their Black identity and activist identity through their garments. So we see on the gloves, the phrase "stop killing." We see on the sweater or the hoodie the phrase "I can't breathe." And "I can't breathe" is also on the hat. So we can see here that this person is, again, speaking to injustices faced by Black people, specifically unarmed Black people being murdered by law enforcement. And while physically protesting or taking a part of this rally, this person is also using clothing to really, really get that message across and express that they are an activist or involved in activist activity, and also as a Black individual. So these are the types of concepts that I was and am continually intrigued by and passionate about researching. So what I decided to do for my work at Iowa State was explore this concept of using fashion to express both Black identity and activist identity. I decided to focus on Black women's fashion, and specifically at predominantly white institutions during the Black Lives Matter era from 2013 to 2019. So we just looked at a brief history starting in the 60s. There are many, many more examples prior to that of folks using fashion or dress to express different identities. But again, I chose to narrow down and focus on this type of demographic and era. So what I did was I interviewed 15 Black women college students. You can see their images here. I did ask for their consent to use their images. Some of them, as you can see, asked to be de-identified, and we were happy to do that. So these are the 15 women who I worked with. And again, they all were attending predominantly white institutions. And we did in-depth interviews with each of them, and we did wardrobe interviews. So what that means is I either went to the participant's home, we sat next to their closet, and they talked through a number of different garments throughout the interview with me. So we had the garments there for them to reminisce upon, to feel, to smell, and it gave a much deeper conversation about each garment. And again, these garments are material that are allowing them to express their Black or activist identity. So those garments were then loaned to me for the exhibition. So we had a total of 40 garments or accessories that were loaned to us through the interviews. And those are what built our exhibition, which is what I'll be focusing on today. So just to give a little bit of context about where is Iowa on the map, right? So Iowa is here in red. It's a Midwest state. And it has a lot of farmland. It's very big on agriculture. And this is really important to think about or to consider when we're looking at this work, right? Because it gives context to the area, the experiences that the women are having, and part of their motives to really express their identities in these different ways. So along with the garments that we looked at, the women also provided images of themselves that they felt allowed them to express their Black and or activist identity. So these are just a few examples. The two images on the ends are images that the women provided. And we can see in the middle, what we decided to do was we blew these images up. I think it was like 36 by something, I can't remember the measurement, but we blew them up large scale and we hung them throughout the gallery space for the exhibition. And we thought that that was really important to help visualize and contextualize the women and along with their garments. And we also wanted to combat the large scale images that you often see on PWIs of white men who are usually, the folks who built the school or donated however much money. So we wanted to give Black women a space on Iowa State's campus to really be seen. And here are just a few more images of the women. And again, these were also blown up large scale and hung throughout the gallery. So when looking at the garments, 11 themes kind of emerged, and these were the 11 vignettes that we featured throughout the show. And I'll briefly touch on each of these today to help us get to talking about what was featured. But before we do that, this is a quick walkthrough of the exhibition space. I'm hoping that this gives you more context. So when you walk in, there's the intro text. Liberated Threads by Dr. Ford was on the table there, along with some exhibition catalogs. And the first vignette is here as Messages of Strength. And next to that was 90s Throwback, followed by Matriarch. And then you turn, and these are the images we saw just a second ago, large scale, and we have quotes from the women as well as some quotes from Dr. Ford's book. We had an iPad there for the exhibition catalog. And again, more images of the women. And this is the curved case that we have more garments with the themes. We also had a video, playing of the interviews. And then we have 2 more vignettes along with more images of the women. This one is Powerful Words, which consisted of a number of slogan t-shirts, as well as some pins. And then Black Girl Accessories is here. We see a Kango hat, head wraps, waist beads, earrings. And the final one is Self-Created Expression. So that's what the exhibition looked like. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about each theme. So 90s Throwback. Many of the women that I interviewed were millennials, and they identify heavily with a number of sitcoms that took place in the 90s, which featured all Black casts. So one example is A Different World. You can see the intro of A Different World playing here on the screen. You can also think about like Smart Guy, Sister Sister, all of these 90s Black shows. And the women grew up watching them, and they would use their fashion to reflect those experiences. So when you watch these shows, there are often in the fashion a lot of bright colors, a lot of geometric shapes. So as you can see in this vest here that was owned by Ani, she bought it from a thrift store, and she said it reminded her of these TV shows. So this is an example of Ani really owning her Black identity and then expressing it through her fashion. Next, we have Matriarch. And here we have a muumuu or a house dress. And this was owned by Vajalise. And Vajalise's grandmother actually was the original owner. And Vajalise shared that her grandmother taught her a number of lessons about being a Black woman, being or surviving as a Black woman in America. So Vajalise would often wear this gown around her own home to symbolize and embody her grandmother and what her grandmother taught her. So Vajalise shares here, I wear this one because it symbolizes the matriarch of our family and the place she holds. It's just the power in this dress. I always remember her wearing dresses like this. It just kind of symbolizes the strength in something that's really simple. So here we can see that Vajalise is again embodying her grandmother, who's a Black woman. So she's expressing her pride in her Black identity while wearing this house dress. Next is Self-Created Expression, and a number of the women who I worked with shared that they often took it upon themselves to make garments or accessories that allowed them to express their Black and or activist identity. So the first image here is a hand-painted denim jacket that reads Black Lives Matter. And The owner of the jacket did not personally hand paint this. It's actually her friend was the one who created it. But her friend owns a organization based out of Chicago. It's called Paint It Back. And part of the proceeds of these types of purchases go to various organizations within the city of Chicago. So again, a clear example of activist identity with the message on the jacket, but even furthermore, thinking about where do the proceeds go from making these types of purchases. And then the second image here is a handmade jacket made by Truth. And the silhouette is of a Black woman. We can see her larger lips. And then we can also see specifically a lot of different textures that represent her hair. So again, this is a very clear expression of Black identity created by hand. Next, we have pride and skin tone. Princess shares here. Bright colors go well with darker skin tones. So sometimes I wear a bright color just to make my skin pop. So Princess and a number of other, who's pictured here, and a number of other participants really shared that they love to wear bright colors against their skin because it allows their skin to be more prominent. And that speaks to, again, pride and Black identity. So we were very excited to have this dress in the show alongside this image of Princess wearing it. It looked really good. The next theme is connections to roots. And this theme pretty much embodies either African garments or African inspired garments that many of the women shared that they would wear in efforts to feel connected to their African ancestry. So Bianca states here, some of my more deeply rooted clothing with African prints I get from the Indiana Black Expo. You will have people from Ghana who will bring their clothing, or people from Nigeria. I make sure that whenever I go there to buy clothing, I support the small businesses. And it's nice because it makes me feel like I'm connected with my ancestors. These are just more images of garments featured in that section of the show. And again, we have a really, really great image of one of our participants wearing a dashiki. And this is also an ode to the Black Panther Party, that civil rights, Black Power era, where a number of activists would wear a dashiki to really express that Black identity as well. So we see connections here throughout time. And specifically, we can see women today still wearing these types of garments to express that Black identity. Fearless expression in everyday wear. Truth shares here, I love flannels, especially vintage ones. I feel like this outfit shows my style in more ways than one, because it shows that I can be creative and it can be a bold statement piece. So this theme is really all about the women being confident and taking agency in themselves to wear what they want and be proud or feel empowered to do so. The next theme was Black girl accessories. And many of the women shared that they would often wear accessories to really express that Black identity. So we'll start here with the hoops, which we see in this image. And hoops are a very prominent accessory within Black culture. So many of the women share that they would wear hoops specifically to show pride in their Black identity. We have another pair of earrings here of a woman, a Black woman wearing a head wrap, which connects us directly to this head wrap featured here. And again, many of the women shared that they would wear these accessories to express their Blackness. And then we have this Kango hat, which brings us back to the image of LL Cool J that we looked at earlier. And again, during that 1980s, late 80s, early 90s era, the Kango hat really became a symbol of Black culture. Kango is actually a European brand. However, when the brand was adopted by folks like LL Cool J, Snoop Dogg, it blew up and it became, again, a symbol of Blackness. So Destiny, who owns this hat, shared that she wears it today because of its relevance to Black culture and Black identity. Next is the theme, Yes, I Can. And this theme was all about Black women in STEM really claiming space for themselves when they were told that they should not be there. So Lucille shares here, definitely being an engineer, I am in a bunch of classes with predominantly white males. So when we are doing certain projects, I end up being the secretary. I kind of end up taking on the role because everyone else, they feel like they've got this. So we wanted this theme, or the garments and stories in this theme really represent Black women claiming space within the STEM field. And the t-shirt here reads Raw Bacon Robotics, and it's from a robotics team that Lucille actually was a part of. And she shared this garment with us to share how she wears this to show folks, yes, I know how to build robots and I belong in this space. The next theme was Messages of Strength. And this theme was about, or it featured slogan t-shirts that really had messages of strength and empowerment. And in relation to this t-shirt here that reads Black Dollars Matter, Vivica states, because I believe that if we keep our dollars generated within our businesses, then we have no choice but to keep growing, and then I think we'll be just fine. So Vivica is speaking to Black prosperity in relation to money. And this was her t-shirt here. So again, wearing these types of shirts, this one is, it reads Phenomenal Women. Our strength is in our history. We have a bunch of images of Black women. So again, just these slogan t-shirts that speak to Black empowerment, which is an expression of Black identity. And then in the next theme, we have more slogan t-shirts, but here we really focused on the powerful words. So the t-shirt here reads Black Girl Magic, a common phrase within the Black community. We also have a t-shirt here, from a quote by Brian Stevenson, who's an activist for criminal justice reform. And it reads, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And then the t-shirt here on the far left, it reads Equality. And this is actually a Nike t-shirt that was released as part of the Colin Kaepernick campaign when he obviously was banned from the NFL for taking a knee. So the participant who owns this shirt shared that she wears it, again, to express her Black identity along with her activist identity, showing solidarity with Colin Kaepernick and his cause. And the final theme here was Call Solidarity. And many of the women that I worked with shared that they are advocates or allies of a number of different social movements, including prison reform, gun control, the Flint water crisis, women's rights, all types of things. And they would often wear garments that allowed them to express that activist identity or alliance with some of the movements. So the hoodie that we see here reads, Don't Forget Flint, with a number of water bottles, as Flint still does not have clean water in 2022. I guess that's where we are today. So a very, very important message, because as we know, the Flint water crisis was detrimental to a number of people and families, and they still don't have clean water. This t-shirt here reads Mount Nasty, and it is a reimagined version of Mount Rushmore. However, the faces have been changed to folks like Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, etc. And we all may know that during a 2016 presidential debate, Donald Trump called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman. So this t-shirt is really a play on words and a way to call out that type of language and kind of reclaiming it as something more powerful. So Marie, who owned this shirt, shared that she wears it in the name of women's rights. So again, an expression of activist identity. So with that, we can see that the women really are expressing their Black and activist identities through dress. And we can see that through time, right? If we look at the work of Dr. Ford and how she really focused on the soul sister who was prominent during the civil rights era, we see the same kinds of uses of dress even today. And what's even more profound is that the dress that's being talked about here is everyday dress. So it's not like a special occasion where these garments are being put on to make a statement. It's actually the slogan t-shirts that people wear every day, which I would argue makes them even more powerful because they're more informal. However, the message is still there. So I argue that these women are the modern day soul sister in the work that they're doing, in the way that they're expressing themselves, etc. So one thing that I would like to also discuss is if you were noticing throughout the presentation, the garments pictured are on white covered mannequins. However, the video of the walkthrough and then like this image here, we can see that the mannequins are not made of white fabric. So what happened here was my team and I, put together the entire exhibit. We dressed every mannequin or a dress form, put them in their cases, hung the images, we did everything. And it was the dress forms are made originally from white fabric. But when we took a step back and kind of looked at everything, we kind of realized that the images on the wall and the white covered mannequins were not really working together, in that we wanted to, in the best way possible, in the most authentic way possible, represent these women and their bodies and their stories. So what we decided to do was take every dress form out of each of the cases. We then undressed all of them. We then ran to Joann's, the only fabric store in Ames, Iowa, and we found these stretch fabrics of different shades of brown to aim to be reflective of Black women's different skin tones. We then stretched and pulled them all in different ways. We pinned them, and we made these custom covers for each dress form. And then after that, we redressed everything and then put everything back in the cases and closed everything up. So it's a lot of work, especially with a team of 3. But we did it because we felt that it was needed. And that's just something that, we really try to talk about in terms of representation within the museum. So feel free to scan this QR code and you can watch the actual presentation for that research, or I'm sorry, that labor that we took upon when building the exhibition. So there's also an online catalog that is of the actual exhibition. So you can scan the code here, and I think we'll also be sharing a link to the exhibition catalog in the chat. But this online catalog is open to the public. It's free access, and everything in the show is here. So you can see each garment with a beautiful picture. You can see some quotes related to some of the garments given by the women. The video tour is there again, a couple curator talks. So I encourage you all to, if you get a chance, take a look at the online catalog. Again, it's open access and free to everyone. And that is all that I have today. So thank you again for being here and for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you so much. We've got a couple questions coming at you in the chat, and I'm gonna read them out to you if that'll work. So Madeline Beer asked, she says that she noticed that all of the images were curated or taken by the individual depicted in them. And how would a more objective image taken by either you or others alter your study?
Okay. I'm trying to find the question so I can see it.
It's early on.
I see. Okay. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Madeline, for your question. I believe you're referring to the images that were hung throughout the gallery. So a more objective image, I guess, I mean, we could have asked the women to come to a photo session and be photographed that way. But again, the images that were throughout the gallery were part of the interview process, which is part of the story. So the women identified these images by themselves or on their own, and then shared them with us in ways to share their story. So I think in terms of presentation, perhaps more uniform images could have elevated the visual aesthetic of the show, but we really wanted to stay authentic to the women's stories and allow them to say, yeah, here's this picture of me that may not be professional, quote unquote, but it allows me to express that identity that I want to share. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the gaze, a really good question and answer. There's another question here. Do you see, from Vicenza, do you see any differences in fashion between majors? What were the participants studying at the time?
That's a great question. Thank you, Vincenza. I think, I don't remember specifically, but majors were, there was a vast variety. And I think, you know, aside from maybe not specifically a specific major dressed a certain way, but it had a lot to do with upbringing, values. I had one participant who solely shopped at the thrift store, and that was it. And that was because they were, you know, very adamant about fast fashion and how it destroys our planet. So I think, you know, their styles are unique in themselves, and it may not be specific to a certain major. So I don't think I have a specific answer for that, but it's kind of nuanced. But thank you for your question.
And Emily asked, did you consider makeup, costume, cosmetics in your study?
Thank you, Emily. I did not. Although it's a great way to consider dress, right? So dress, again, is any modification of the body, and that includes makeup or cosmetics. So for me, that just wasn't my focus. And you'll learn perhaps when you pursue your graduate degree that projects have constraints, they have time constraints and things like that. So this was a 2-year project, which is why I had to narrow it down a bit. But there are a number of scholars who look at makeup and cosmetics. One specifically is Dr. Jaleesa Reed, who is at Cornell. So feel free to look her up. I'll drop her name in the chat.
Great. Well, this might be a good time to ask you, why did you choose Cornell for your doctoral studies? And what opportunities and connections are offered to you there? And what are the drawbacks? And what did you consider when you were selecting your university?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, quite honestly. My advisor at Iowa State, who is Dr. Kelly Reddy Best, she encouraged me to apply to Cornell for a number of reasons, but she's also fairly close to my current advisor, Dr. Denise Green. Dr. Green's work is phenomenal, and it was a great opportunity to be able to be her student. Cornell is also a great institution in terms of the resources that they can provide. They offer a number of, you know, different labs within our department that we can work with. We have a 3D printer, we have a body scanner, sewing labs, etc. So it really was about the resources available to students, because grad school is the time and place to, you know, get everything you can because it goes by so quickly. But I would say for sure the resources and being able to work with professors who have interest in social justice and the type of work that I do as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you found a place.
Yeah.
There's a related question. Thomas is asking, what was your original plan before you got interested in fashion, or how come fashion took over your interests for study?
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. So When applying to college as an undergraduate, I had an interest in fashion already, right? So just throughout my life, I've been interested in clothing. My mom is a very fashionable lady. She used to own a boutique, all of these things. So I was always interested in fashion. However, I was not trained as a designer. I didn't know how to sew. So I did some digging and I learned that there was a more business side of fashion. So you could do buying or product development. So that's what I explored during my undergrad. And it was a great experience. However, I found out that I thrived in the research realm. So my senior year at CMU, I worked with Dr. Michael Mamp on a honors capstone project, and I explored the life of Lois K. Alexander Lane, who was a Black woman in Harlem who made this Black fashion collection and the Harlem Institute of Fashion, all of these things to really elevate the Black community in relation to fashion. And when I learned about her story and wrote about it a bit, I was sold. I was like, okay, this is really what I want to do. And I quickly learned that I could continue that type of research during a master's. And here I am as a PhD. So it's been a bit of a journey that hasn't been a straight shot. When I started in undergrad, I did not plan to get a PhD. But again, I just found my stride and really learned what I enjoyed most, which is really looking at fashion from a lens of Black experience. So.
Thanks, great answer. Maybe you could give a little more advice, maybe to any undergraduates who are interested in pursuing a graduate degree or even a bachelor's degree in fashion studies. What classes should they take? And yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, so classes that you can take, I would suggest classes like fashion history, right? And those are the classes, the fashion history class is the class that asks the most questions because a number of our fashion history books are exclusive of a lot of different histories, right? So that's a great class to challenge, right? Like you can ask questions like, well, why isn't this history being told? And then perhaps research it yourself and say, hey, to my professor, I learned about this person. Can we talk about this during class? So those are the classes, definitely the fashion history courses. I think fashion theory courses are also very, very insightful, right? So theory may sound very scary or nuanced. I know it did to me as an undergrad, but the fashion theory courses really equip you to think more critically about fashion, outside of being just a consumer, and really allow you to explore those ideas in different ways. And I would say when exploring graduate programs, if that's what you are interested in, really look at the professors who are at these different institutions and try to see if you can align your work with their work. So usually in graduate programs, you have a major advisor who guides you through your work. And sometimes it's difficult if you have, say, a passion for athletic wear and the person who you end up working with is more a social psychiatrist approach, right? So just think about who you could work with at these institutions and try to make sure that your research interests really align. I would say that's the most important thing. And then just explore the program, see if you can find their mission, their vision statement, and see if it aligns with your values as well.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. It's so important. Thanks for sharing that. There's some love for you there in the chat from Rhonda P. Hill. Congratulations on a well thought out and research visual communication on how transformative fashion is in cultural identity and relevant messages of the time.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. It's very sweet. Thank you.
Well thought out. And then there's another question. Allison, I'm curious, are you wanting to jump in at any time or shall I keep going here?
Oh, I mean, I will absolutely jump in. I think let's get to, I think Joy asked a question. If I just wanted to get to people's questions in the chat first before I jump in. So yeah.
So yeah, Joy's question is, back to Dyese. Do you think as Black women's style evolves, will there always be an aspect that relates to the past or activism because of how important and influential those events have been within the Black community?
Thank you, Joy. That's a really great question. It would be great to see the future, but I don't know for sure. But I would say if we think about what we do know, we know that fashion is a circle and styles repeat themselves all the time, right? And we know that the fuel behind activist movements is often injustice. And we know that there's a rich history of injustice throughout the world, even beyond the USA, right? So hopefully there are always folks speaking out about those injustices. So I think it's safe to say that, you know, based on what we know of fashion repeating itself and people having the courage and agency to fight against injustices, that, you know, we will continue to see dress as a form of expression to combat those injustices. Thank you, Joy. That was a good question.
Another comment in the chat here from Gigi, who loves the curatorial decisions you made, specifically with altering the mannequins to be more representational of the participants. It's very thoughtful. And that brings up another issue about how it is to engage with a museum. I mean, it's such a traditionally white space, and the kinds of assumptions that are made, such as white colored mannequins, are something that, yeah, made a difference in your exhibition. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was quite an experience for us. And even as people building the exhibit, we didn't think about that beforehand. It was after we saw everything happening. So again, these projects and, you know, taking those fashion classes really allow you to really question what's in place right now and really explore how the museum can be more inclusive and thoughtful about museum practices.
Great.
I saw that George, I believe, had their hand up. Are they still here?
Yeah, my bird is screaming, so I'm sorry if that bothers anybody. But I was curious, you had pointed out that there were members of the study who altered their own garments to be like representative of their activism. And you even also later pointed out that Nike was also selling activism wear. And I want to know if you or your participants had any opinion on, I guess, just, is it better for someone to make their own activism wear, or do people prefer being able to purchase activism wear from a company like Nike?
That's an amazing question. Thank you, George. So unfortunately, I didn't explore that too deeply in my project, but it's a question that I've thought about, that a lot of people are talking about in the fashion industry. There's a book, and I'm blanking on the author, but it's called Commodity Activism. And it really speaks to, you know, consuming from a holistic activist lens. And I talk about it a bit. It wasn't during the research, but while we were analyzing the garments for another project, we were looking at like the tags, right? Like who made this and where is the money going? And one example is the Mount Nasty t-shirt that was created by, it's a business based out of Iowa. I'm blanking on the name. I can't think of the name right now. However, it's a business based out of Iowa, and, you know, they're very progressive. You can find a bunch of slogan t-shirts in this store. However, all of the money doesn't go to these movements, right? So it's like, if I'm purchasing a t-shirt, an activist t-shirt from Nike, are any of the proceeds going to the organization that I'm outwardly aligning myself with. So those are questions that we definitely want to explore further. And I think you bring up a great point, which is better, right? Should I just make it myself? Or do I purchase it from someone else? But that's a really critical question. Thank you, Anin, for putting the book in the chat. So definitely I would recommend Commodity Activism.
All right. And you've already mentioned Liberated Threads by Dr. Ford. Are there any other books that you mentioned? I think a couple, and I didn't quite catch them. So I'd love to get it written down.
So the other paper by the quote from Blake is actually a article in Dress, the journal Dress, by I can't think of the first name of Blake. However, it's called "It Ain't He, It Ain't She, It's We." That's the name of the article. I would recommend Elizabeth Way's book that just dropped, Black Designers in American Fashion. It gives insight into even more Black fashion history. Any other books? Tanisha Ford has another book called Dressed in Dreams. It's more of like a memoir, but it speaks again to fashion and Black identity, Black woman identity being expressed through fashion. So I would read those books if you get a chance.
Thank you for that. It's really a great list. Maybe also the fashionandrace.org database under their book. They probably have a pretty good list.
Absolutely. They have Kim Jenkins at Ryerson. She has a very, very profound list of all types of resources on the Fashion and Race database. Yes.
Yeah, and I saw that she was scheduled to be a speaker at your exhibit.
She was. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit us right when we opened, so we had to reschedule that, but definitely recommend Fashion and Race database.
Sounds great.
I wanted to make sure that we didn't skip over Zebediah's question because I think it's a good one. I'm curious whether any of the interviewees spoke to clothing choices that came from a more negative place than the categories you talked about. For instance, clothes that were picked to blend in with majority white classmates and avoid stereotypes. And that was actually a question that I sort of had for you, just because I think that I was curious if the prompt for the exhibition, like if the clothing that people were sort of including in the exhibition, it was specifically prompted by things that were about expressing that identity, and if there was a specific sort of time, place, occasion that they felt comfortable wearing these things, or if this was something that was being in the context of Ames, Iowa, if they felt like they were comfortable expressing this, particularly in our current political climate. So.
Yes, thank you. That's an amazing question. And that question speaks more to the actual research project. So again, the exhibition was part of my actual research, master's research theses. And they go hand in hand. However, the exhibition kind of built upon the research. And in the research specifically, I asked those questions like, what spaces are you wearing these garments in? Do you feel safe on campus? Do you not feel safe? When do you feel safe? What do those spaces look like or feel like? Why do you feel safe in those spaces? And throughout that process or that part of the interview, there were conversations about, I feels like I can wear this in this space, right? So maybe I'm going to my student org that I go to all the time, and everyone looks like me, or we have the same values. So yes, I can wear this Black Lives Matter jacket in this space, but I probably wouldn't wear it if I go to a fraternity party or if I'm walking home late, right? I know that those were definitely points that were made throughout the interview. And although the exhibition focuses more on pride in Black identity, right? There were deeper conversations about where these garments are actually being worn on campus and in the surrounding community, which is a really, really important part of the story as well.
There's a A question by R.L. Robertson in the chat. How has the reaction been to the exhibit, and by the participants and also by the general audience? And how has your experience been with working on this and presenting the work? It's very thoughtful, inclusive, and respectful work.
Thank you, RL. The reaction was quite positive. So the exhibition actually took place, it opened February 2020, and we closed down April. But again, the pandemic hit us like right after we opened. So we had the opening ceremony. This was before everything went down, and it was quite positive. We had the president of the university there at the opening. She was very excited and supportive of the work. We also had the dean of the college. And then, of course, the community members, right? The arguably most important folks, because the exhibition was open to the public, free access. It was on campus, which is somewhat of a barrier because on campus you can't really drive a car. You have to either walk or take a bus. But the community was very happy and supportive as well. Again, the context is Iowa, Ames, Iowa. So historically, there are not many reflections of Black identity within the space. So for it to happen was definitely in favor of a lot of folks. And my experience presenting it has also been positive. Constructive criticism is always something that I accept, and I'm happy to hear, and folks share those ideas as well. But generally, people are really supportive of the work. And I think it's because of its authenticity. Obviously, there's always something to learn as a researcher, as a curator. You don't always get everything right. But I think the heart of this project was really pure in that we just wanted to be reflective of Black women's styles and really highlight them. So yes, thank you, RL.
Here's a question from Vicenza. Have you considered extending the study to include Black men's fashion? And was there a particular reason you chose Black women's fashion instead?
Yeah, so I don't currently have any plans to extend this specific research project. And I chose to focus on Black women, honestly, because I'm a Black woman who has attended a number of PWIs. And again, as a researcher, you have to remove yourself, right? And be reflective of your participants and not allow your own experiences to influence the work, which is what I did as a researcher. However, I'm here for Black women. So that's what we decided to focus on and really highlight. So thank you for your question.
We have a couple more questions coming up here. Hali asks, going back to the history topic from your readings, if you could go to a certain time in history to visit and see things for yourself from what you've learned within your studies, what time and era would it be and why?
This changes often for me. Thank you for your question, Hali. I'm currently reading Carol Tulloch's book, The Birth of Cool, another book I would recommend. And she has one of the case studies within the book is about Billie Holiday and her use of fashion and dress. And I'm like, wow, what if I lived during that era, right? Or maybe like the Harlem Renaissance, where Harlem was really fun and fashion was booming and people really expressed themselves through their fashion in different ways. So yeah, maybe I would say the Harlem Renaissance for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Kiara asks, what would you like to do in your career after your doctorate program? Do you plan to curate more exhibits, publish research, or?
Thank you, Kiara. So I plan to stay in academia, hope and obtain a professorship position somewhere. And in that role, yes, I would love to continue to curate exhibits, conduct research, my perspective on research and academia is to do it for the people, right? I really want to go beyond the academic walls and really reach the community that I'm passionate about. So it's really easy in academia to be in a bubble, right? Because we publish in our journals, but our journals, some of them aren't open access, right? So, you know, the folks who you're writing the stories for sometimes can't access the journal. So I try to think about that in my work, and I plan to do that as I continue in academia, excuse me, and, you know, think about how do I make this more accessible, which is why I'm really happy to share with you all the exhibition catalog, right? Because it's just a link and you click on it and you can see everything in the exhibit, right? But it's always a layer, right? What about folks who don't have internet access, right? Or don't have a computer? So there's always work to do and things to consider, but that's how I plan to approach my work in academia, and you know, hopefully continuing to do the work while also serving the community.
That's good. We have time for maybe one or two more questions if people want to throw those in the chat, but well, we're seeing about that. I'm curious, where do you think fashion studies is going to go in the next 5 years, say?
That's a really interesting question. I think right now we definitely are in a time where a lot of fashion scholars are like breaking so many boundaries, like just like shaking things up, which is really, really inspirational for me. We have folks like Ben Berry, who's now the Dean of Parsons. We have Kelly Rady Best at Iowa State, Kim Jenkins, you know, like these names and people who really care about making fashion as inclusive as it should have been this entire time. And I'm hoping that we continue in that trajectory and really become critical of everything we do, right? You can always have a critical lens to anything, rather it's a fiber science project, right? You know, it may not be the first thought to be critical in what we're doing, but we can be. So I think that's where we're headed. And I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Allison, I'm gonna ask you if you want to add anything in here, or
No, I mean, I guess I am so inspired by your project and your work, Dyese. I just feel like, and one of the reasons I think it's so great for this history of dress class and also some of the things that we're thinking about here at PSU is that, I mean, you were, I mean, a master's student, maybe, I know we have a lot of undergraduates, but you were a student, and what does it mean to really sort of be a student and like think about like sort of your history and your sort of the clothes that are sort of on a college campus and how those are going to become the kind of fashion history that we're sort of studying of the future. And I think that I think that's just kind of a really, I would encourage everybody that's in the history of dress class to really think about like that you are like what does it mean to sort of curate sort of conversations about the way that we dress even today, and how do we sort of think critically about the decisions that we make, where clothing comes from, who designs it, how it's sort of used to construct our identities in the world. There's just so much there that I think that there is to explore. When you were talking about Tanisha C. Ford's work, I'm so glad you mentioned Dressed in Dreams, because I love all of Tanisha C. Ford's work, but I think I think I really respond to that one specifically because it's very much like a memoir, and it's about seeing sort of, it's like just this lovely journey of like really sort of the way that clothes have intersected at various points of her life that have shaped her identity, and then using, right, that scholar lens to kind of analyze all of these things. And so that's, and I feel like I see the same thing that's happening in your work, and I just think it's so inspiring for us to kind of think in that way. So I don't know if that's I really have a question, but I just wanted to just share that appreciation and that joy, because I think that it's whether you're on the scholarship side, we also have a lot of makers in the room. I know from the people that I see, but it's just, even if you don't necessarily identify as a scholar or an academic, all of these things that we're talking about still inform like the kinds of things that we create as well, which I think is another important aspect. Be talking to makers more in fashion studies as well. So. But so anyway, it's more of a thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and the inspiring and the ways that we can think about how it might inspire. Maybe we'll do some exhibitions here at Portland State that are based on clothing and curation. So
awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would just encourage folks to, you know, as Allison mentioned, like if you're a maker or more of a scholar, you know, you can always look back in history and be inspired by the garments that, you know, are from history. Or I was going to say something else. Go through your parents' or grandparents' closets with them, right? When did you wear this and why? Was it popular? Where'd you buy it from? Things like that. And even like local historical societies, or perhaps I'm not sure if there's a textile collection on your campus or in your program, but like, you know, donate your pair of leggings that you're gonna not wear anymore, right? Because that's a time right now that is going to be relevant to, you know, scholars or folks, you know, doing research about us in the future. So there are a number of ways that you can approach fashion, right? That we all know that as interdisciplinary crowd here. So yeah, I would encourage you all to just dig in and really find what inspires you.
Great advice. Well, thank you. This has given us all a lot to think about. Thank you for the book list too. That was an extra benefit. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I would just like to remind everybody, so we did record this and this will go on to our archive if people want to reference any of the things that Dyese was talking about, and we'll also include all the links that were mentioned today. So that'll all be there for you, for everybody, and for you, Dyese. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Annan, for making this a part of your class and sort of leading us in our discussion. We just so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So
you're doing great. There's a lot of love showing up in the chat too.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. Feel free to email me if you have. I'll drop that in the chat if you have any questions. But yeah, thank you again for having me. It was a blast. And I hope you all have I guess it's kind of early afternoon for you all. So
Yeah.
Evening.
If you find yourself on the West Coast, come see us.
Will do. Oh my gosh, I would love that. Yeah.
That would be great.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, but we'll keep